So what the committee was trying to do was to try and get a handle on what exactly the government needed to do to respond to the issues that were making it frustrating for small and medium-sized enterprises. What we found as well was that some of our witnesses who appeared before us, they were quite open about their experiences, knowing full well that it was a committee that sometimes they were being televised. They knew that their names and their businesses would in fact be used in the report, but the level of frustration was such that that was something they were prepared to do. So that will tell you, Madam Speaker, just how serious of an issue they felt they were facing. And what was really interesting is that there seems to be a growing sentiment among some small, medium-sized enterprises that it is not worth the effort and investment to bid on federal government procurements. To quote Mr. Charles Duffett, the Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer from the Canadian Advanced Technology Alliance, he provided the committee with an example of a small, medium-sized enterprise that found the federal procurement process overly slow and complicated. Liquid Computing, in an Ottawa area technology business, developed a powerful computer that reduces the space and the electricity used by current data centers. According to Mr. Duffett, the board of directors at Liquid Computing gave instructions to Liquid's chief executive officer not to sell to the federal government because in their view it's a waste of time. It takes up too much energy and nothing goes anywhere. In the 2 to 3 years it tried to sell its computers to the Canadian government, Liquid sold 4 units to the United States government. Now that's telling, Madam Speaker, when our own government has a process in place that is so burdensome that a company looking to sell its product has to look elsewhere and has to give up on the federal government. The committee also heard testimony detailing other barriers in the procurement process that small and medium-sized enterprises face when trying to bid for federal contracts. For instance, the Business and Furniture Manufacturers Association, an organization that leads, advocates, informs, and develops standards for the North American office and institutional furniture industry, in testimony before the committee, stated that the industry has perceived that Public Works has moved from a historically inclusive procurement process to a more exclusive process. We heard this time and time again, Madam Speaker, from witnesses that appeared before our committee. So much so that there were witnesses brought in, I would say, to find out if in fact this was the case for all small, medium-sized enterprises. And unfortunately, what we heard was that it is a serious issue. Now, we've made recommendations as a committee, and the government, the federal government, has acted on some of those recommendations. But I think it's important for us to speak to the issues today, Madam Speaker, so that people will have a real appreciation for how difficult it is for those businesses on which we come to depend for employment, how difficult it is for them to actually perform in our country. We heard similar testimony from the shipbuilding industry. And the shipbuilding industry is one that has a very high profile in my riding. In fact, we're looking at building boats of all sorts, and we're looking at an opportunity to access federal contracts. But again, Madam Speaker, it appears that accessing those contracts is very cumbersome. It's a very cumbersome process. Another small business, and small, it has about 100 employees in my hometown, called Dynamic Air Shelters. The business is called Dynamic Air Shelters. And they are looking to access federal government contracts through the Department of National Defense. But again, what I'm hearing constantly, the refrain over and over and over, is that the process is too complicated. The amount of work required to complete a request for proposal is such that if you do not have maybe 10, 20, 30 people who are designated to do nothing but complete the RFP, then there is no way that they will even have a chance of being in the ball game. So it's a serious issue, and we have to look at the importance of small, medium enterprises. We have to do everything we can to make sure that they can access federal government contracts, and $14 billion worth of contracts, Madam Speaker. There is no reason why, there should be no reason why, that small, medium enterprises cannot access a significant portion of that money of that business. So when we talk about trying to respond to the concerns that were brought before the committee came up with several goals. One, that the procurement process must be improved for small and medium enterprises to facilitate their awareness of and access to federal contracts. We heard time and time again how important it was that that be achieved.